Hello and welcome to today's episode in which I have a go at making pierogis, which are a little Polish dumpling that sound delicious and I think are going to be fairly straightforward to make. I had a comment on the French onion soup video recently asking if adding water while you're caramelising onions helps keep the smell down. We had a bit of chat back and forth and then the person said that they'd use the technique to make some caramelised onions to serve with pierogis and then asked if I'd ever made any. I realised I hadn't, so I did a Google and thought, yeah, that sounds perfect. So Paul, if you're watching, this one's for you. Thank you very much for the suggestion. I'm not 100% sure on how to say them like a Polish person would, but a pierogi, from what I can gather, is a little dumpling. Very similar, I guess, to a gyoza, which are Japanese, or perhaps a ravioli, which are Italian. So it's like a little stuffed dumpling thing. I'm going to use a recipe from Lazy Cat Kitchen. I'll link to their website and the recipe in the description below for you. The original recipe author mentions that these are traditionally known as ruskis. The classic filling is potato, cheese and fried onions. For the cheese element, they use some tofu that's been dressed with a bit of soy sauce and lemon juice. I did think about putting some extra mature vegan cheddar in, but I thought, well, maybe I'll try this kind of tofu version because that sounds pretty interesting as well. I'm going to do the dough first because that needs to rest for half an hour or so, let the gluten develop. I'm using plain flour, AP flour in the States. It's going to be around 420 grams, I think. And then a teaspoon of salt, and we'll sieve that together. Push a hole in the centre. I'm going to add a cup of hot water. The recipe states hot, so that's what I'm going to use. So that's about 240 mils. And then I'm also going to put a bit of water at the side as well, because I'll probably add more. And then I'm going to do a tablespoon and a half of olive oil. I'm going to go in with my dough hook. The amount of water that you'll need to add is going to depend on a variety of factors like the humidity of where you are, the humidity of the flour, all that kind of thing. The trick is to always add things bit by bit. Start bringing it together and then I'll tip it out probably on the counter and work it that way. One of the pluses of using hot water is it feels quite nice in my hand. I'm gonna flatten this out and then sprinkle on a little bit more water. Mix it all back together. Just trying to look on the original to see if it specifies what the consistency of the dough should be, and it doesn't say. It just says the right consistency. It feels quite tight. Maybe I'll add another half tablespoon. So the dough is not sticky, there's some elasticity to it. Let's try rolling it because I want them quite thin. Yeah, I think that'll do. I'm going to put it in my bowl and I'm just going to wet a tea towel. That's to stop it drying out. So I'll put this to the side while I work on the filling. We need 650 grams of potatoes. For me, that's 3. Someone's going to cook them off in the microwave. So I'm just going to split them into quarters, I think, and then chunk them down. So I've got my potatoes in a dish, cover that with a lid. There's no liquid or anything in there. And then I'll do them 5 minutes, stir another 5. While the potatoes are cooking off in the microwave, I'm going to dice down and start sauteing 2 white onions. One's large, one's kind of small to medium. So I'm just making a series of vertical cuts and then we'll go horizontal. So the onions are all diced. We'll get that in the pan. There's about a tablespoon of olive oil in the pan that I've been warming through. These will probably fry for 10 minutes or so. I'm on a medium heat. Mine goes up to 9, I've got it on 6. And I'll use some of this for the filling and then some just to serve on the side of the pierogi. Once the onions are done, I'm going to fry off some of this sauerkraut as well. Frying it is just going to make it a little bit drier, a bit toasty. So with the onions, I'm just looking for them to start going a bit golden brown. This is the tofu I'm going to use. It's 200 grams. I think it was extra firm. I had this block of tofu in the freezer, so that's what's created this kind of texture that's full of holes. It forces all the moisture out of it. I'm going to crumble the tofu into a bowl, and it will crumble very easily because it's been frozen. So I pressed it between 2 lots of paper towel. I'll squeeze in the juice of half a lemon. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of light soy sauce. The original recipe just says soy sauce, so this might not be as deep in flavour. Let's give that a stir. I'm going to add a little pinch of nutritional yeast. Got like a cheesy kind of vibe to it. 1/4 teaspoon, half a teaspoon. So that's the tofu all done. Potatoes are all cooked. I'm just going to drain them over the sink. Onions are all finished, so I'm going to pull them into a bowl and then I'll put the sauerkraut in. Heat up a bit more olive oil. I've been blotting the sauerkraut with some paper towel just to get some of the excess liquid off. And all I'm looking for is just to dry it out a little bit, toast it off. And this is just going to be served on the side of the pierogi. By all means, you could put sauerkraut in them as well, I suppose. Over to the potatoes. If you don't have a microwave, just boil them until soft. That's fine, or you could steam them or bake them and scoop them out. I'm going to use the potato ricer. Works on the same principle as a garlic press. Fill up the chamber, squeeze it through. This is where I get a feel for how well my wrist injury is healed. So the beauty of a potato ricer is you don't need to bother peeling them first. So you can just pull the peel out. If you're not able to clean your ricer straight away, at least get it in water so that the potato doesn't set hard inside the holes. Time to start assembling the filling. I'm going to add in a good grind of black pepper, 1/4 teaspoon, something like that, 1/2 teaspoon, depends how much you like pepper. The original recipe says a teaspoon of salt. That's a no from me. I'll start with 1/4 teaspoon and then taste it. I'm going to stir this just to get the salt and pepper distributed before I start overloading the bowl. That's just under 1/4 teaspoon of salt because the onions are quite sweet. This is where we are with the sauerkraut. So bits of it are still soft, but then there's some nice bits that are kind of crunchy and crisp. I'm going to add in 1/2 cup of the onions. Yeah, probably could have got away with just doing 1 because I've got lots left. We'll tip in the tofu and gently combine those. As I make each pierogi, I'm going to put it on a board. So I'm just going to lightly flour it just to make sure they don't stick. And I'll put that off to the side. The recommendation for this quantity of dough is to divide it into 6. I'm going to cover the rest. I'll use a plate for that because I need to drape the tea towel over the pierogi so they don't dry out. Change of plan, I'm going to use cling film to drape the assembled pierogi because that towel's very wet. I'm going to use a rolling pin to roll the dough, and I've got a little pastry ring that I'll use to cut them out. You could use a cup or a glass, something like that. And you want it 1 to 2 millimeters thick. You could also use a pasta machine. I do have a pasta machine, but I've been using it for polymer clay, so it's no longer food safe. Put my cutter on. I've got 8 to work on for now, and then I need a heaped teaspoon of filling. And I'll put the filling on one side. And you want to make sure you've got a good amount of clearance around the outside so the dough sticks to itself. And then fold it together, pinch the sides. I'm going back over it a couple of times just to make sure there's a definite seal. There we go, 1 pierogi. So I'll put that under the plastic, do another. I'll do these 8 and then I can cook those off and do some eating, and then the rest of it I will do off camera. I've got 12 of the little pierogis all folded up, tucked away. They're all looking pretty good. The convention with pierogis is apparently to boil them and then you can either eat them like that or to then fry them off. I'm going to take a different approach because I want to try it out. I'm going to fry them, add water to the pan, put a lid on, steam them, and then fry them off again, like you would with gyoza or kind of dumplings. I find with boiling dumplings, like I'll buy bags of frozen ones from the Chinese supermarket, it's just a bit flaccid is the only word I can think of describing it. Whereas the other day I tried the kind of fry steam method and it worked really well, get a really, really nice texture on there. I'm gonna try and force myself to freeze a lot of these. So I was Googling whether they needed to be cooked before freezing and stumbled across this kind of recipe from J. Kenji Lopez Alt. He does the Food Lab, which is a huge, great big book. It's fantastic. But he says the best way to cook gyoza is to put the raw dumplings into the pan with some oil, fry them off for a few minutes, then tip a load of water in, put the lid on, let the steam cook the top of the pastry, and then as the water evaporates, the oil then kind of takes over again and crisps the bottom back up again. I'll probably boil a portion and then fry them off, and I'll update the pinned comment and I'll tell you which way I think is the best. It just says add water. It doesn't say anything about whether it should be hot or cold. I think I'm gonna do hot. This is a 30 centimeter pan, 12 inches. I put 8 in the pan to get an idea of how many I could get in there, and I think I can get 12 without squashing them in. So, you know, they'll have enough space between each because you don't want to overcrowd the pan. I'm also gonna mix up a quick little dipping sauce type thing. So I'm gonna use some plain unsweetened soy yogurt, mix that with some Dijon mustard, just a little dunk to put in there, because otherwise everything's a bit dry. Optional, you know, use whatever you like. If I had fresh dill, I'd put that in, or fresh parsley. I might snip in some spring onion. So once the oil comes up to temperature, I'm going to put the dumplings in. The guy I mentioned about the dumplings, he says the key is to keep swirling them around the pan. So keep swirling them and then space them back out. And we're looking for the bottom to go golden brown. Yeah, just about there. I'm going to kind of tip them back, pour all the water in there in one go. Apparently that stops them sizzling. Lid straight on. And then we're looking for all the water to evaporate. I'm just going to have a peek, just because I've never done this before, so. Okay. I did a cup of water in a 30 centimetre pan. If you're doing a 28 centimetre pan, you're going to want like half a cup of water. To keep swirling, just to make sure nothing sticks on the bottom. Look. I think that's enough, so I'm going to turn it back down to 5, and then I'm going to go in, separate things. I can see a nice translucency now to the wrapper, which is a really good sign that they're cooked through. These are looking yummy. I'm flipping them just to get a touch of colour on the top, and also just to dry the surface off a tiny bit. The lovely little pierogies are all done, looking very inviting. Yes, and that's Dijon and yogurt dip that I made. Scattered the top with the sauerkraut and spare onions. The sauerkraut, because it's pickled, it's got a nice amount of salt in there as well, so should add a nice bit of extra flavour on there. I'm going to try and bite it in half so I can show you the inside. That's the inside of it. Yeah, that's worked really well. The wrapper, the dough is perfectly cooked through. Ooh, it doesn't feel like mushy or anything like that. To say that's a few very humble ingredients. I'm going to dunk it in the dip. The yogurt adds a nice bit of creamy coolness, and then the Dijon has got a nice bit of kick to it. Yeah, the author of the original recipe said their husband can do an entire batch in a day. I can see why. That method of cooking them for me is perfect. The wrappers are tender, but they've still got a nice bit of bite to them. It's like pasta. Whereas, yeah, I've got a feeling if I'd have boiled them, it would have just been, it just wouldn't have been as nice. Because they're fried, there's a nice bit of texture. Now I've got the recipe down, that's something I'll be making plenty of, because it's a great thing to have in the freezer, and a fraction of the cost of the Chinese dumplings I buy from the supermarket. I think they're 5 or 6 quid maybe. It's not a quick thing to make, don't get me wrong. I've still got a massive quantity of dough and filling. I'm going to grab my phone, put my Bluetooth speaker on and watch some Critical Role, which is, if you've not come across it before, in their words, it's a bunch of nerdy ass voice actors sitting around playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. And because the screen's fairly static, it's just their faces, it's a perfect thing to be doing, you know, listening to while you're doing something else. So while I'm doing my crafts or cooking, I'll stick that on and just listen to them having fun times, which is great. I'll link to it in the description. Once I've worked my way through this batch, I'll play around with all kinds of different things, and maybe some vegan sausage and mushroom, maybe feta and spinach, that kind of thing. All kinds of different things, just bang it in a dough and pan fry it. Heaven. If you need to do a huge quantity of them, the boil and then fry method is probably going to be faster, because you can get, say, 12 boiling in the pan, pull those into the frying pan, put another 12 in the boiling pot, and cycle through it like that. Whereas that way took, yeah, 15-20 minutes, something like that, to do 12. Because you have to fry quite gently, then add the water and let that boil off, and then fry them off again. I want to say thank you again to Paul for giving me the idea of doing pierogies. That's a great little recipe, thank you very much. If you've got any suggestions, or if there's a recipe that you really want but don't know how to make it vegan, give me a shout down in the comments. I'll always do what I can for people. This video was made possible thanks to the financial support that I get from my community over on Patreon. Their monthly dues helps me buy ingredients, pay for all the other associated costs that come with a YouTube channel. So I want to say a massive hello and thank you to my community there. If you want to join up, there's a few different tiers, so you can pick whatever feels affordable. It's a nice way of showing creators that you like, you know, a bit of extra appreciation. In return, you'll get some behind the scenes content, bonus features, community chat access, that kind of thing. If you'd like lots more delicious plant-based food from around the globe, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the little bell icon if you want to get an alert as soon as I publish a new one. While you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.